If you're not moving forward in life, you're moving backwards. This is Ace and Jamie, and this is Breakpoint Podcast.
Our goal is to create and deliver content that evokes a change of spirit and heart, seeking out messages that will relate and inspire.
Stories and experiences of people and their breakpoint in life.
Little rough around the edges, completely unhinged, and wildly compassionate.
We bring you Breakpoint Podcast.
We are excited to introduce you to someone who has an incredible story. We're very excited to have him on the podcast. Aly is a manager at the Zuckerberg Initiative, where he advises on criminal justice grant making. During his 12 years of incarceration, he co-founded the San Quentin News, an award-winning publication, earned a college degree, and learned to write computer code with absolutely no internet. Tamboura has spoken extensively, including to leaders at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, about his story, the systemic barriers that keep so many people from achieving their full potential, and the urgent need to expand opportunities to formerly incarcerated people. All right, cool. So awesome, Aly. We are so excited to have you on the podcast today. We appreciate your time. You have an incredibly powerful story that we're excited to share with the world. And, so welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Happy to share my story, always.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. I mean, because we want to make sure we can cover as much ground as we can, and
Okay.
There's a lot to cover. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your story. Where does it kind of start?
It starts, I think, prior to my incarceration, I ran a geotechnical company in the San Francisco Bay Area. Never thought for a million years that I would end up incarcerated. Lack of emotional intelligence and being in a highly charged situation made, I made some bad choices, and I ended up getting incarcerated. And was sent to a prison called Corcoran in the Central Valley, which is it's a level 4 prison, so it's the highest level prison outside of death row. And didn't think I would make it off that prison yard. Really, really violent place. Saw every type of violence imaginable. And I started taking correspondence courses while I was there, and I learned about the Prison University Project at San Quentin, and told my counselor I wanted to go there, and he was a pretty good guy, and after a while at Corcoran, he transferred me to San Quentin so I could attend the college program there, and then that really changed my life from there.
It's powerful. And I know from doing a little bit of research about you, hearing about, when you were first incarcerated and some of the stories that you told. I mean, here you are running a business, and now all of a sudden you're looking at how many years?
So I was originally sentenced to 17 years. I got 3 years back on an appeal, so I got it down to 14 years. And of that, I served 12 years.
Wow. Yeah. And so I remember you saying, I didn't know how I was going to live. You'd never had any run-in with the law. You'd never, even spent a night in jail before. And now all of a sudden you had to kind of wrap your head around the fact that you were going to spend the next 17 years essentially in prison.
Yeah. I mean, at that, when I first was sentenced, I had like this hope in our system. I was like, oh my God, there's no way. Why would they give me this much time? Or so I had a little bit of hope on my appeal, and as time went by, that faded. That just, you really start understanding that it's really easy to get there. It's not easy to get out. And a lot of the things that I learned are really what fuel me to change the system today.
I know hearing the story, from an outside perspective of getting 17 years on a first conviction, to me that sounds insane. For someone who hasn't been in the system already. Looking back now, do you think the judge had it out for you, or is there anything specific that you feel that?
No, absolutely. The judge had it out for me.
That's what that sounds like.
They and I have to be forthcoming. They offered me a deal that was like 3 years, a little over 3 years, and I didn't take it. and on the advice of my attorney. And so when I finally did get convicted, the judge just like really threw the book at me. And that's another issue I see with the American criminal justice system. It's like, you know, they bargain 90, I think it's 97% of cases are plea bargained out. And it's, you know, it's this adversarial system that's just, you know, how do you gamble with your life? I mean, especially in like states like California, like it's illegal to gamble, right? You know, but they will allow you to gamble with your life.
And what do they call that? Stacking the deck?
Stacking the deck. So what they do is, it used to be like before this mass incarceration or this experiment with mass incarceration, it used to be like if you went and did armed robbery, it was armed robbery, right? But now they'll do like conspiracy to commit armed robbery. Gun enhancement on armed robbery, and that's like one of the things that I got was a gun enhancement. Transporting stolen goods, like they will stack up everything that they think that potentially they could convict you of, and some of the stuff they probably can't convict you of, but they use that to get people to take plea deals. And you know, if you're looking at your exposures, like, you know, 100 years if you got convicted of all of those. And especially as African American man, you know, sometimes it's not wise to go in front of a jury. It's not a very fair tool, and prosecutors use it almost all the time.
I remember in one of your videos hearing you say, you know, Black, brown, and poor people tend to be kind of at the brunt of getting the maximum amount of time.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's been a few studies, one by the Pew, I want to say one was Vera too, but if you're brown skinned in America, you are less likely to get bail, you are more likely to get convicted, and when you are convicted, you do about 20% more time than any other racial demographic. So I mean, it's not something that's like just my opinion. This is something that's, you know, that has been proven and has metrics behind it. But that's just, you know, the way the system works. I like to quote Brian Stevenson. He says, we have a system that treats you better if you're rich and innocent than if you're, rich and guilty than if you're innocent and poor.
You know, now you're in a maximum security prison. It's your first conviction, and
my only conviction.
Your only
conviction.
Thank you. We'll edit that. Your only conviction.
Thank you.
And I guess the reason why I keep thinking of first is because, like Ace said, it's just so surprising that you would get so much time for a first offense, a first conviction, that it just is kind of insane to think about. So now this program that you were applying for was based in San Quentin. And so by applying it would essentially, if you were approved, allow you to change locations. Yeah.
And it, so the way it works is like when you first go in, they score you. And they have like a score sheet, and you go to a reception center, and then out pops this number, and then the number determines on what level of prison you go to. And it goes, like I said, it's 1 through 4, and then death row. And so 4 is the highest level for people who are not, you know, condemned to die. And so my number, because the amount of years I was sentenced to, I think back then you got 2 points for every year, sent me to this level 4 prison yard. And I think it was like 1 point above level 3, and they sent me to level 4. Then when I got there, you know, it was just it's really hard to describe. It's like, you know, I hear people who have gone into combat or been like over to Afghanistan or you know, over to the Middle East, and they talk about combat and how people, you know, unless you've done it, you never will understand. And that's the analogy I can give for like living on a level 4 prison yard. You know, people die, people get stabbed, I remember my bunkie and I keeping track of how many people we saw stabbed just over a summer. And finally we decided, and it was, over 30 something, we decided like, we're not going to keep track of it anymore. But the amount of violence is it's taxing. And then what's also taxing is the hypervigilance. Like you have to be on your toes all the time. You can't. I was telling someone just the other day, you couldn't bend over to tie your shoes on the level 4 prison yard without having someone else behind you. You couldn't go get a drink of water from the drinking fountain on the yard without having someone stand behind you. Like someone always has to have your back. You can't walk the yard alone. You always walk in pairs or threes or fours, because it's just that dangerous.
And Leah, how do you stay out of trouble, right? You hear all the different stories of, sometimes you got to get around some people you don't want to get around to protect yourself, or
I didn't stay completely out of trouble.
Yeah.
I think the difference is that you getting caught, right? That's yeah, I mean it's first of all, I mean there's things that you can do, like don't do drugs.
Yeah.
Don't borrow anything, don't lend anything, keep to yourself or keep to the group that you identify with. Yeah, and just follow the rules, and try not to say any words extra than you need to say, right? Just don't make friends. Just there's a lot of things. The other thing is don't get involved with like any kind of homosexual activity. That's another thing that can get you in a whole bunch of trouble really quickly. Yeah, and just try to fly under the radar.
Yeah.
You had a close call once. Well, I'm sure you had quite a few close calls, but you mentioned the shower where.
Taking a shower in the Sereno shower. Yeah, that was a bad move. So yeah, the everything is racially segregated, and so even the phones, the way that the day room works in the building, like half of it, the whites and Serenos are on, which are Southern Mexicans, which are the most powerful gang in the California prison system. And then on the other side, you have the blacks, others, which are, anyone else, like if you're Asian or they call you an other. And the Norteños, which are the Northern Mexicans. And so when I first got there, I took a shower in the Sereno shower because I didn't know. It's not like it's marked or anything.
Yeah.
And they were pretty forgiving. They told me, "Hey, are you new?" But no, if I wasn't, that was a definite. You get stabbed, right? That's a definite thing where that's not tolerated.
That's got to be a crazy situation because like you said, you're walking on your toes, especially when you're brand new coming in. You don't know who to trust, who to talk to. Did you? And I don't know if you did or did you even make any, friends or acquaintances that like were there with similar, like they were there but they weren't supposed to be there, or
yeah. So I was what they called a no-tip, which means you have no gang affiliation. So I'm not a Blood, I'm not a Crip, I'm not affiliated with any of the street gangs or the prison gangs, which is a dangerous thing in itself because you don't have anyone to back you up. Like if I went and stole something from a Crip, I have the whole Crips gang that is gonna do me harm. If someone comes and steals from me, I have me. I spent a lot of time with other Muslim incarcerated people, so a lot of time at the chapel, and really just told everybody, I'm trying to focus on my faith and learning, and just like and so I was able to stay away from most things. There's things I don't talk about that
Sure.
happen, obviously, but yeah, I did my best to stay out of trouble.
Awesome. Now, talking about your transition to San Quentin, this is really cool because I think that having access to programs like this is so powerful. It's obviously one of the reasons why you're really passionate about it. And I would love for people to know more about these types of programs, how they can access them. You know, when we talk about the number of people in the US that are incarcerated, I know that in 2017, it was like the USA makes up 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated people. And that number just blew me away. Are those numbers still accurate today? Have they gone up?
I think it's about 23.5 to 24% now. It's gone down a little bit, but we still have 2.2 million people in the United States that are incarcerated, which is, it's just daunting if you think about that. I mean, think about if you had 2.2 million people in one spot, what that would look like, right? Yeah, it's ridiculous. You would think, like, if mass incarceration worked, right, we would be the safest country in the history of the world, right? There would be no violence, but it doesn't work. And we incarcerate people for a myriad of things, and most of them are not violent, contrary to what people believe. Most people in prison aren't there for murder or rape. We have people in prison for quality of life issues. We have people in prison for mental health issues. We have people in prison for drug addiction. And I think, our society just hasn't figured out how to do it right. And so we use, I should say the criminal legal system uses incarceration as the fix all end all. And it's not working. And it's not working for victims. Like, most victims, if you ask a victim, do you want someone to go to prison and come out worse and victimize somebody else? They'll say no. You ask, taxpayers, do you want to pay, for instance, California, we have 121,000 people incarcerated here. Our budget for that is $13.2 billion. Wow. I mean, it's insane. And if you ask taxpayers, like, do you want to keep someone in prison for 10 years for writing bad checks or something, they'd say, no, I don't want to pay that. And for the incarcerated people, it's not working. And obviously for their families, it's not working. And, one of the things is prosecutors don't really have too many other options. We're starting to see some drug courts and some restorative justice, but for the most part, like, that's the one lever they pull. Go to prison, pay some fines and fees, go to prison, jail or prison. And, I had the pleasure and honor to go visit prisons in Scandinavia. I went to Finland. You can argue whether Finland's in Scandinavia and Norway. And they just do it so much differently. And it's really amazing. I mean, there's some things that they don't have, like everybody kind of looks the same there. They have a living wage there. Yeah, and they don't have like the history of slavery.
Yeah.
And racial bias and things like that there. But they treat, like, when you first go into the system, they treat, the first thing they say is like, we're going to prepare you for a life free of crime. So as you go through this journey, we're going to make sure that you get everything you need. Your only punishment is your loss of liberty, right? When you go to prison in the United States, very many jurisdictions, geography, believe that you're there for punishment, not that you're there as punishment. So there's a lot of deprivation, a lot of things that they do to basically terrorize, human beings. And like, if you think of solitary confinement, if another thing I was talking, we have this big movement in the United States around policing and how it's been biased for years and since its beginning. But a lot of people don't know that policing doesn't end in on the streets of the United States. We have 2.2 million people in prison that are policed. The difference is that because you've been convicted of a crime, you're actually seen as deserving of violence, right? And so, yeah, policing there is a lot different than what you see out here in the real world. It's harsh, and they use violence like at the drop of a dime, like, and there's no oversight. Like, nobody sees it. It's not on the news. It's not like people have a cell phone and can show that. So it's
you're talking about as far as like corrections, right? How they need to
correction officers. Yeah, corrections officers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they consider themselves law enforcement and act as such. And so if you break the rules or even have a minor infraction, it's met with violence, sometimes severe violence.
Yeah, I mean, we hear, stories about, depending on the crime, a lot of violence, not only from, other inmates, but also from the corrections officers, depending on the type of crime you've committed.
Part, if you have a crime against a child or you're a child molester, it's almost a foregone conclusion that you're going to be met with extreme violence, probably from day one, day two. I've seen a lot of child molesters suffer like extreme violence, and not all the correction staff are bad, but there are correction staff that will set people up, right? They will make sure that that whoever that they don't like is injured, or possibly even killed. Before I got to Corcoran, they used to have gladiator fights where the like, I look it up, but they would let like different gang members from rival gangs out of the cells and have them fight. And if they didn't fight, they'd shoot them.
Wow. So, no way. The work that you do now, and you being able to go and visit some prisons in other countries, is that kind of how you're creating or trying to create this new model for the criminal justice system?
The CZI, we're really not, our North Star is decarceration. We want less people in prison, a smaller footprint. And so it's really our partners in the field that are doing the hard work. And our kind of goal is to support people that are doing good work, help them accelerate that work, give them technical assistance if they need it, and really look to things that are decarcerating and also safe, right? We don't want to dump a bunch of people out on the street. So our North Star is decarceration, but we're not really the people who are driving the work. We're supporting the work.
Right, the resources, gotcha.
Do they have a lot of things like the last mile in Scandinavia, like training programs? What do you think is like the root to their success?
I think there's just so many things that they do right there. I think like one of the things that they do is like, if you think of the education model that we have here in corrections, it's done by corrections, right? It's and in many places they're doing a much better job, but in many places it's substandard. There, the prison system does not run their education department. Their education department is run by I guess the Board of Education, whatever you'd call it in Scandinavia. Medical, like California got sued, went all the way to the Supreme Court for having unconstitutional levels of healthcare and mental health care. And there it's done by the same agency outside. It's not done by corrections. And when you think of that, like corrections they're not equipped to do that, right? They're correctional officers. They're there to make sure people don't go over the wall and keep order. But they're not medical professionals. And when they do hire people, it's usually, I hate to say this, but like people that can't work anywhere else, and so, and the idea that you don't cease to be a citizen, right? The United States has used incarceration to disenfranchise people. They've used incarceration as a way to control a segment of society. There, you're still a citizen, and there they want to help you because they know you're going back out into society. Here, it's almost as if they don't care. And so when you look at the programs there, I mean, I went to this machine shop that was just like state of the art, just their programs that are really preparing you for society. Programs, in-prison programs here that are run by the corrections departments, they're not doing that. They will, I mean, if you want to be a janitor, yeah. But most of the programs that run in the carceral setting in the US are things that are brought in by outside agencies or by volunteers to get people prepared. It's not something, I mean, in California, you have like it's called PIA, Prison Industries Authority, and they make like shoes and furniture and things like that. And, there's not a lot of manufacturing in the United States anymore. And they have building maintenance and they're getting better. I shouldn't throw them completely under the bus, but they are, there are some trades where they're training people for construction and how to be plumber and some vocational trades, but it's nothing compared to what you see in overseas anyway in Europe.
So speaking about, let's talk about that, these outside agencies. Just to clarify, CZI, also short for those of you listening, I know it's a tongue twister, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, so we'll refer to it as CZI, funds and provides resources for agencies, the outside agencies that will develop programs for incarcerated people.
Yeah, we do. So we also, decarceration and second chances, I should have added.
Okay.
So the idea is we want to have less people going into the criminal legal system. And then the people that are coming out, we don't want them to recidivate or commit another crime and go back in. And so we really believe that offering opportunities to formerly incarcerated people is essential in lowering like the amount of people that go into the system or cycle through the system. And so, yeah, we do fund. So I was a student in the last mile when I was in San Quentin. That's why I learned to write computer code, and now we fund them. It's kind of cool. Actually, out of my portfolio, they sent us to. When I first started working at CZI, they sent me to Oklahoma to do like a landscape assessment. Like, so a team of us went and we met with elected officials. Went to laundromats and talked to normal people and talked to cab drivers and visited correctional institutions. And when I was there, first thing I said, I'll never go back to Oklahoma. And then the second thing was I learned that Oklahoma had the highest per capita incarceration rate of women. Wow. And I remember going to the women's correctional facility and touring it. And when I got back, I was like, oh man, I have to do something. Like, what can I do? What can I do? So I called the Last Mile, their executive director, and I said, hey, would you guys expand into a women's facility in Oklahoma? And they're like, yeah, sure. So
that's awesome.
So we CZI funded them, and now they're in a women's correctional facility. I was ready to go to their first graduation. I was so excited, and COVID hit.
After COVID. Can you tell us now, can we talk a little bit about you joining the Last Mile program and kind of go back to that? So you also wrote or learned how to write code with no internet. What was that like?
Difficult. Yeah, as my time started winding down at San Quentin, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, maybe go back into my old trade. And the Last Mile came in, and the first thing they offered was this entrepreneurship training course. And so you came up with a business idea, wrote a comprehensive business plan, learned how to pitch it, and then we had like a demo day where they brought in a bunch of Silicon Valley professionals and people from really all over into the chapel in San Quentin, and we all got up and pitched our ideas. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work. But you know, after that, I was like, okay, so now what do we do? And the founders of the Last Mile said, hey, we should teach these guys how to write computer code. So they built out a curriculum and brought in a bunch of computers, and you had to apply. You had to be like disciplinary free and have an aptitude for it, and gave you like a logic test. And I took that and I got into the first cohort and started to learn how to write computer code. I remember it felt like I took my brain out of my head every day and like deep fried it and put it back in. I mean, it was just that difficult. I'm kind of a math nerd, and I was like, oh yeah, math, but it's not the same.
That's wild. And is that where you got a chance to meet Mark Zuckerberg?
I did. So there's 2 tracks, The Last Mile, 6-month tracks. So, and then at the end, you build a capstone project. And Princeton epidemiologist reached out to The Last Mile. She read about it in the newspaper or something and said, I have all this data on childhood diseases. Can you guys do something with it? And so my capstone project was basically doing a data visualization of childhood diseases over time in the United States. So I built this using this library called D3, which my family sent me a whole bunch of books. I think they're here on my bookcase still. But like I would just sit on my bunk and read and read and read. And then when I got to the classroom, you know, I built out this web app. It's still, I think it's still up and running on the Princeton on their webpage. And so we were told, like, you're going to have a special guest to visit the classroom today. And at that time, you know, there's a lot of people that go in and out of San Quentin because of where it's located, close to the, you know, in the Bay Area, basically. And most of the other prisons are out in the Central Valley and don't have a lot of access. So, you know, at that time, we were just like, you know, you almost feel like you're monkeys in a zoo or in a cage, and people are coming to, you know, see the animals in the cage. So we didn't give it much credence. But then, you know, in walks Mark Zuckerberg, and I was like, whoa. And they had us, or had me, demo my capstone project. And so, and he was really interested. You know, he really wanted to know how we built it, asked a lot of really in-depth questions. You could tell he really cared. And yeah, I remember the last thing before he left, I asked him if he would hire people out of the Last Mile, you know, developers. And he didn't say yes, and he didn't say no. He just said apply, which I never did.
Such a crazy story, because I mean, obviously, you know, we kind of know how it ends, but I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about after that happened. I mean, what was next steps for people graduating from the Last Mile or finishing the program?
So the first thing I did when we graduated from Last Mile, they decided to, because when you write code, it's like one of those things where you have to keep doing it. It's not like riding a bicycle where you can, you know, it just comes back memory. And it's an industry that's constantly changing, and there's new technology and new ways of doing things. And so they built what's called the Last Mile Works, which is the first software development shop in a prison in the United States. And so we took on projects from just the real world. Like I remember we built a social media dashboard for Airbnb and built countless websites. And yeah, and so I went to work there just building real products. And so we learned like agile software development. We learned how to we worked as a dev shop, and we used all the best practices of a dev shop. And so I worked there until I came home. And then from there, I worked for a small dev shop in San Francisco. And then once I came home, I learned that there was little gaps in my knowledge. And they teach front-end engineering at the last mile, and I really wanted to learn back-end. So it's what you call a full stack developer. And the opportunities for that are more prevalent, and there's more compensation. So I went to a coding boot camp called Reactor, and that was hard too. And because there's a bunch of I'm middle aged. There's a bunch of kids that just graduated from college with computer science degrees and just don't have a lot of real world experience. And so they go to these boot camps, and I was there 14 hours a day, sometimes 16 hours a day, and then did a 2-hour commute to get home. It was like I just went to sleep and went back. And then after that, I took some classes on data structures and algorithms, and interviewing, how to pass the tech interview. And then I started applying for full stack developer roles, and was doing pretty good, getting some traction, but getting the calls back was a problem. And I knew I quickly learned that it was the background check. And so what I did is I crafted like a 250-word narrative of why I got myself into trouble. Because and one of the things, the state narrative is horrible, right? Anything that the state writes is meant to paint you in like the worst light possible so they can get a conviction. And much of it's a fallacy. It's like how they think things happen. Not to take away from the conviction or anything, but this is just another reality of the system, right? They're not there. They interview people, policeman comes in, writes a report, district attorney prosecutes you, and that becomes gospel. And so, I wrote this narrative, didn't use words like prison. I said correctional facility, didn't say felon or ex-con or anything like that. And then I just said, this is what happened back then, and this is what I can do now, and this is how I could add value to your company. And then I started getting traction, started getting job offers, and took a job working for a big software company here in the Bay Area. And then I got a call from a recruiter at the Zuckerberg initiative.
Wow. So when you would send this out, would this be prior to the interview or after the interview, just for other people who may be in a situation kind of thinking about
it? At right when you start the interview.
Got it. Then bring it. Okay.
Yeah.
Got to make sure you get in front of them.
Well, that's also from trial and error, so you learn.
Well, the great thing is because then they get to meet you as well, right? And you get to build your own narrative around it because they're finding out from you.
Well, taking control of the narrative is important. It's your story. Like, don't let someone else tell it for you.
I love that.
And I learned that. There was one company, and I forget the name of it, but they're like one of those companies that do the like box dinners that you can order online.
Yeah.
And they were basically like, the whole software team was like, yeah, we'll see you like in 2 weeks. Like, you killed it. You passed the interview and we like you. And then when I didn't get that call back, I knew. I was like, yeah, I've got to do something about this.
That's so cool. I mean, just the thought process behind it. I guess one thing I want to just kind of touch base on is, obviously people going to prison, some people, things you've seen there, right, could change somebody. Is there anything in particular that you would say maybe made you a little more driven for other people that maybe had the same opportunity to get into the last mile, or
I think a lot of people who are incarcerated have drive. I don't think I'm a unicorn. I think it's about opportunity. And if you give people opportunity, more times than not, they'll take it and run with it. And I argue also that the reason a lot of people are incarcerated is because of a lack of opportunity. I was watching people and looting a Target store on TV. I'm sure you guys have seen the same footage. And I thought, like, what would make someone loot, right? I'm not going to go in, if I was there, I'm going the other way. I'm not going to go in the store and steal things. And it's lack of resources, lack of opportunity, right? If the people in that store had like a really good job and a really good life, they're not gonna do that stuff.
To get a really good job. And can you kind of maybe just talk a little bit about that? Because
I just wanted to prepare myself for success, right? I didn't want to be one of the people that are rearrested. I didn't want to be one of the people that are sleeping underneath a bridge. And I had a lot of time on my hands, and so I tried to use it to benefit me as much as I could. And anything that came across my way that I thought would be beneficial to me, I signed up and took it. And it's just, it was kind of it's a scary thing, especially at my age, being 50 and being released from prison and thinking about how the hell am I going to take care of myself? They don't, out here in the real world, they don't bring you toilet paper on Wednesdays. They don't call you for dinner and be like, hey, chow time. You've got to feed yourself, got to clothe yourself. It's a scary thing after spending that much time incarcerated and then thinking, hey, what the hell am I going to do? And I'm fortunate that the last mile came along and that was like my segue into where I'm at now.
And how'd you end up connecting with CZI? So was your resume floating out, or did they reach out to you?
Yeah, my resume, I had my resume on LinkedIn, and their recruiter reached out to me. And I have to tell you, like so when I started applying for jobs, the last week of my data structure and algorithms course was salary negotiation. And I was just like, yeah, I don't need that. The first job that comes my way, I'm not.
I'm going to take it.
And they also give you a coach. And we have this big dashboard that, all the jobs that you apply for, the ones where you get a second interview, it's like a really complex thing. And the guy's always, I'd get on my dashboard and I could see that he was logged in, checking on me. And so when I got that first job offer, the thing that they say is like, ask for 5 to 7 days before you accept the offer, just in case another offer comes in. And I did not want to do that when I got my first offer. It was like $80,000 a year, almost $90,000 a year. And I was just like, yeah. And he's like, 5 to 7 days. And so I did. But then I was in that 5 to 7 days, I was kind of like, yeah, I finally landed a job and things are looking up. But then I got another job offer. And then I, started sending the offers to both companies, and they started bidding me up. And then one company bowed out, and then another company came in, and then it went up, and then that company bowed out, and then a big company came in and offered me a very more than fair compensation, and I did not ask for 5 to 7 days. I was just like, yeah,
give it to me. I'm
taking this.
And then CZI, the recruiter, reached out, and at the time I didn't even know what CZI was. So I did my research. Oh, Chan Zuckerberg initiative, and I can tell you, I was late to my first meeting with the recruiter because I was in court, helping get one of my friends who had 3 life sentences resentenced. We convinced the district attorney to resentence him, and it worked, and so he got time served. He had done 17 years on 3 life terms for residential burglary. And so when I got to the recruiter, I apologized and said, hey, I then really started telling him about my story. And when I was in San Quentin, I wrote for we me and three other gentlemen reinvigorated this San Quentin News, had been shuttered for like 20 years. And we started inviting politicians into San Quentin, and we invited district attorneys into San Quentin. It was actually my friend who got resentenced. It was his idea. And so we built these relationships with elected officials. And so when I came home, I was at the DA's office, just, lobbying for my friend, like, come on, he's done 17 years on residential burglary, resentence him. And so he ended up getting an attorney and all that. And so when I was telling the recruiter that, he was like, hey, well, we're building a criminal justice reform division in CZI. Are you interested? I'm like, oh, kind of. But, I had this high paying job waiting for me, and I was onboarding, and yeah, then they offered me a compensation package that I couldn't turn down. And it's so mission based that, aligned with what I was doing already. And so I said bye to the other company and went to CZI. And then I remember we had an all hands meeting, which we have every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, where Mark and Priscilla present and talk to the company. And I sat in the front row. And when it was over, I walked up to Mark and I said, hey, do you remember me? He goes, no. I'm like, I was at San Quentin. You remember I demoed like this? He goes, oh, yeah. And he was like, I guess that coding program really paid off. But I say that to say that it wasn't like he knew I was getting hired or he did me a favor by hiring me. I mean, I it happened, on my own merits and because of hard work.
That's such a cool story.
I love it.
That's such a cool story.
Do you still advocate for people, like you did your friend? Is that something that you do sometimes? You get in that direction, advertently or inadvertently?
Yes, I still do. I have a friend right now. His name is Michael Harris. He's the founder of Death Row Records. He like gave Denzel Washington his break. He signed Tupac Shakur, and he was incarcerated with me at San Quentin. And then when that was over, the federal government came and picked him up. So he did state time and federal time. So I've been working hard to get him out. And actually, I work hard to get as many people out of prison as I can, because I just don't think we're doing it right in the United States. And we put far too many people in prison for far too long. And so that's my job. That's what I get paid to do. And so it's not, I do have personal friends that I'm still trying to get out, people that I've met along my journey. Yeah. But it's not just that, there's mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles, and there's just people that just do not need to be incarcerated. And it's trying to change the narrative around that, because when I talk to people, they kind of have the same outlook that I did before I was incarcerated. It's like all murderers and rapists and really bad people. But then when you get in there and you realize it's just people, right? Sure, there are, some hardened people in the carceral setting, but that's not, the vast majority are not. There are people in a bad situation that made a mistake, and putting them behind bars for, decades is just, it's unhealthy for our society. It's unhealthy to taxpayers. It's unhealthy to their families. And there's just so many collateral consequences that come with incarceration. I think, people who break the rules should be held accountable. Absolutely. Should it come with a cage? I don't think so. When I go over and look at the Scandinavian model, sure, you can't leave the correctional facility, but they're filled with light and art, and they care about their citizens, and they want to make sure that their citizens get the help that they need. So when they return to society, they're not damaged and they're not committing more crime. Here in the US, we're just about being punitive. Like, how can we punish? How can we break people? How can we put people in solitary confinement for years and years and years? How can we exacerbate their mental health issues? Like, until we start thinking about, these are people, Like I don't use words like inmate, incarcerated people, right? That pejorative language. And I've challenged, I've said this a million times, but I challenge people all the time. Think of the worst thing you've ever done in life, whether you've gotten caught for it or not. And then how would you feel if someone said that's who you are, and that they didn't even call you by your name, you're a convict or you're whatever, right? That's who you are for the rest of your life. And it's just not, it's not right. It's just, it's a terrible way to treat people. And people start believing it, especially young men, right? Like you're a thug, you're no, you're a person.
How do we get programs like Last Mile available in the New York prison system and, all over the country? You talked about all the tech jobs that go unfilled every year, the need for people in these industries. And then I watched a video where testimony after testimony of corporations who are hiring from these programs, and they're the best employees they've had because they have purpose. They want to be there.
I think he's still thinking about the worst thing he's ever done.
I promise not to call you that.
I saw when I asked you this guy, I was like, oh.
Like, oh man.
But going back to that, it's powerful because it's like I would not want to be called the worst thing that I've ever done. And it's so hard, even in this interview, how many times I said inmate once. I did. And I was like, oh no, and I'm working hard, but I feel like that thought process, what you're teaching us just from this interaction, I feel like more people need to think like this. And you're right. It's just not what society thinks and is taught, at least not the majority. So
well, we're taught that, right? It's like that's how we treat people who made mistakes. And if we keep doing that, I think it drives crime. Like you call someone a convict and inmate, all of this stuff, they come home, you can't get a job, you can't get access to public housing. There's there's 3,000 collateral consequence to having a criminal conviction. And so what do you expect people to do? Like as a society, what do we expect people to do? If you were a drug dealer before and you can't get a job, you can't do anything else, but that, what are you going to do? You're going to go back to that.
What you're doing, yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so our system, it's just so flawed and so broken. And then they want you to be held accountable. Like you better get a job. You get on parole, you better get a job. And a lot of and it's not impossible, but it's really hard. And then usually those jobs are low wage, low skill, and you can't make a living wage. And when you were asking about the last mile, that's one of the things that I love about the last mile is that people can make a living wage, right? And they're not. One of the things that people don't recognize is a lot of the individuals that do come out of prison, even if they don't get rearrested, are now a burden on social services, right? Now they're at the county health department because they don't have health insurance, applying for whatever they're eligible to get. Where if someone gets out and can make a living wage, they are no longer a burden on any social service, and they're paying taxes, can provide for their families, and can move past that, right? And so I think that's why it's important to have programs like the Last Mile. And you asked how do you get the Last Mile is scaling. I think they're in 13 prisons in 6 states. But not everyone can be a computer coder, but there's all kinds of other, technical training or even some of the stuff in the trades, you can make a pretty good living. But there has to be the will, right? There has to be treating people like people, and stop calling like if you call someone a felon, right? It's a lot harder to convince someone to train someone that you've marginalized as a felon. than if say this is a person, this is an incarcerated person. We're going to help this person. Not only we're going to help this person, but by helping this person, we're going to help society. We're going to make sure that this person doesn't come out and reoffend. We're going to make sure this person can pay taxes. We can make sure this person can take care of his or her family and give them a second chance or a third chance, whatever the chance is, you know? And so that's why it's really important to start thinking about the narrative around the criminal justice system and how we treat people and how we marginalize people. And I think a lot of this work, you know, the pendulum is kind of swinging the other direction. We went onto this whole tough on crime, war on drugs, lock them up, throw away the key. And now the pendulum's swinging this way. And I think as the pendulum swings this way and philanthropic organizations get involved, our electeds are involved, they're like, hey, this isn't working. We really have to start really thinking of everybody as people and humanizing people.
And Aly, what, and you kind of touched on it, maybe that's the answer, but what you know, it's like a massive machine, right? And the last mile is like fixing the broken machine in one area. You know, there's so many different areas that need to get fixed. What is, from your point of view, in your opinion, like, what's the answer? Is it more private companies like people like Mark stepping in and CZI, or what do you think?
I mean, there's so many different levers that need to be pulled to transform. I don't really think we can reform our system. I think we really need to transform it. But yes, for sure. Anything that the state runs usually gets mired in bureaucracy. And it's really hard to get things. I mean, I don't know if you guys have gone to the DMV lately, but it's really hard for them. And that's not, like, if you think of corrections, that's not historically what their job is. So when you get these private-public partnerships, they really work well. And, you know, for the corrections departments, you know, most of the leaders don't want to see people coming back, you know, and the high rate of recidivism, which I don't like. I don't like that calculus, but we'll use it here for now. Yeah, I mean, I think the public-private partnerships are wonderful, but also training, like the government, on how to have efficient programs, showing them that they can do things differently, and little by little, you're seeing Department of Corrections like opening up their doors. Most of the time, they're closed, and they don't want people inside their facilities, and they don't want programs. And now that the pendulum's starting to swing the other way, you're seeing them kind of open up and saying, okay, yes, like let's see what we can do.
In ending, you know, what can we do? What can anyone who's listening to this do to help create some change? You know, we're business owners. We don't own a large corporation, but maybe there's a business owner that does and can start to hire differently and look into programs.
The three things I would say are, one, start really thinking of people who have gone through our criminal legal system as people. Stop using pejorative language to label people, because you wouldn't like it if it was done to you, even if you didn't go to prison. I still think you're thinking about what you did.
Please don't label me as that, for sure.
Second of all, for sure, second chance hiring if you're a business owner or just even a person, a regular person out there, like, give people a chance, give them a second chance. You'd want a second chance. And then the last thing, which I think is the most important, is proximity. If you don't own a business and you don't have resources to help people coming out of the criminal legal system, or even help people who are at risk before they get involved in the criminal legal system, go volunteer. You know, whether it's volunteering at like a girls and boys club, or, you know, some kind of program in underprivileged or underserved communities, or volunteer at the prisons. I mean, most of the programs that benefited me were run by volunteers, and I think that's really crucial to changing the narrative too, because historically, like our correctional facilities have been closed, and the only way people really get any news or understanding is from the media that like glorifies and sheds the worst light on prisons. Like, you know, you wouldn't want to go and see a bunch of guys working in a garden. You know, if you look at shows like Lock Up and things like that, you know, they show the worst aspects of it because, you know, people, that's what advertising pays for, is viewership, right? And so like go volunteer, go to your local jail, go to your local prison, find a program, volunteer, teach people, help people. And I think the more people that we get going into the correction system, the better or easier it is to change the narrative. And it benefits both parties, right? A lot of people, once they start volunteering, they get hooked. I mean, they're in there all the time, and it makes a difference, so much difference. And yeah.
Love it. Thank you so much, Aly. We appreciate you. Today has been awesome. We appreciate you so much.